right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the world's greatest Bronze Age Spider-Man podcast. Here comes the Spider-Cast. I'm your co-host, Mike Allen. As always, I'm joined by
Joshua Mervell, and today we are, for better or worse, going to be talking about the 12-part crossover event from 1989 called Atlantis Attacks. We're going to be mostly focusing on the 3 Spider-Man issues. I'm sure we'll kind of talk about the whole thing a little bit.
I don't know. Will we? Because I didn't read any of those this week. Did you?
So no, I haven't read this, but I read oh my God, Ages of Atlas.
Okay, Ages of Atlas.
Yeah. So I'm pretty familiar with them. I've read a couple of runs of theirs, and there is one storyline where they kind of do a new updated Atlantis Attacks story.
Okay.
But it's actually about Atlantis and not about some god serpent that is returning in this weird celestial guy trying to form a crown. And
here's the thing. No matter what. Here's the thing. I read this when it came out as a kid, and it confused the hell out of me. You know, and I've read it a few times since then, and I read it again this week, and this is kind of Marvel continuity at its worst, because they have such a rich history, and reading this should make you want to find out more about Atlantis and Atuma and whatever, but it's just so off-putting, because not only is the main story not ever great in these annuals, but the backups that are meant to explain everything, again, they don't dramatize it in an interesting way. They just dump facts on you, right?
Yeah. It really doesn't feel like there's a coherent story.
No.
And from what I've read, there isn't. So because I read the new updated Atlantis Attacks, I found out about the 89 version. So at the time when I was reading that, it was I think 2 years ago that storyline came out. It was 2019, 2020. I think it actually had a weird hiatus because of the pandemic starting. But I went back and kind of skimmed through this storyline before, and it seems pretty shitty just reading their recap of what happened. Mm-hmm. So do we want to just kind of go in briefly and
talk about what happened, what the overall story?
Yeah.
If you want to, sure, go ahead, because I don't remember.
Sure.
It all,
okay, so there's this high evolutionary guy named Gore, and he's tied in with I think the Eternals or something. He's this big god guy, but he's he worships another god, the snake god, and his whole plan is to bring back this snake god that he's obsessed with, and kind of have this it's called Sep, I believe. And we've actually run into this before, if you remember, all the way back in 1982 in the Marvel Team Up Annual. Do you remember that really bad one with Doctor Strange?
Yep.
And the Serpent Crown?
Yeah.
That's the same thing that's happening here. And so since then, sorry?
I was going to say, I think that was written by Mark Grenwald, who I believe was one of the main brains behind this crossover.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Apparently the Serpent Crown is a Conan the Barbarian thing.
Okay.
So I don't know if maybe he's a fan of Conan, so he's been wanting to introduce this stuff into the main Marvel universe, because I know at the time Marvel had the rights to Conan, right? I'm assuming, since they did the yeah. So anyway, since the events of that Marvel team up, the crown has been destroyed. So Gore has a plan to forge the Serpent Crown back together. So he's finding all of the pieces to it and putting it back together, which we do see in the Amazing issue. We kind of see the end result of that. He goes to Atlantis, and he tricks Atlantis into waging war with the humans, which is, I guess, why this is called Atlantis attacks. That way, he can go and destroy Atlantis. So he's kind of like tricking them into leaving Atlantis, so that way Atlantis doesn't have an army, so he can attack and destroy Atlantis. He's also trying to transform every single human into snake people to serve Sep. He's also kidnapping 7 women to be wives of Sep, so they can all birth his children. So that's great. And then that's kind of like his whole thing. Like, he has all of these things that he's planning, and throughout the entire annual, he pretty much fails at absolutely everything, all while like stealing all these women. And by the end of the arc, he realizes that he's had Scarlet Witch this whole time, and because his plans kept getting foiled and he couldn't actually do any of it because he sucks, he just like forces Scarlet Witch to bring back Sep at the end.
Are you saying Sep or Set?
I think it's Sep, or maybe it is Set.
It's S-E-T, Set.
Set? Okay, sorry. Yeah. Set.
No problem. No problem. I was wondering.
Yeah, so apparently Scarlet Witch just makes it happen by the end of it. So like nothing that happens in all of these annuals really matters. He could have just kidnapped her and like done his whole thing right from the start. Anyways, this it's another incoherent multi-issue crossover that doesn't really amount to anything. They did this last year, correct? And what was it?
Evolutionary War was the
right. Evolutionary War. Yeah. And I don't know which one is better, honestly. They're both pretty on par with their...
this one seems to be more popular, like with modern fans, but definitely no better. I mean, it's just an incoherent, like okay, let's just... Even just some of the people they picked to do these books, this is where... This year and last year is where Marvel's annuals went from being on par with the monthly books to being much lower in quality, I think. Because previous annuals, like if you go back to the 60s, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby are doing FF, and then they do the FF annual. And the Fantastic Four annual #1 is one of the best issues of the whole run, where Submariner, actually coincidentally, Submariner and Atlantis attack New York City. It's a great classic story. Superman annual #1 was a classic, going back all that way. But then by this point, annuals become a dumping ground for sort of second tier talent, and trust me, it gets worse from here in the 90s. But I mean, okay, for example, let's just start with Amazing. Now,
sure.
Do you want to summarize Amazing, or do you want me to? Because I can if you want.
Yeah, sure. I'll take Web if you want.
Okay, sure. I can do. I'll try to do Amazing, and I'll try to do Spectacular.
Okay,
but
yeah.
I also, because I bought these when they came out, I have they have a special place in my heart. Starting with this cover. Now, John Byrne had just come off of Superman, so he returned to Marvel, and around this time he was starting on, I believe it was Namor and She-Hulk. So he was still big, but not quite as big as he was at his peak. This cover to me comes off as pretty plain, with Abomination lifting up the car and She-Hulk with the light post. I don't know. What do you think of it?
Yeah, it's fine. It does seem a little plain, I guess, for this, for it being an annual and for it being the launching off point.
Well, it's not really the launch. It's not chapter 1, so it's not the launching off point. But yeah,
true. Yeah. But
being the Amazing annual, it's supposed to be this big event, but it doesn't look like much at all.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think any of these three really are great covers. I guess the Spectacular's fine.
You know what's funny? I think the Web is the best one, to be honest.
Yeah.
At least it feels like what it's supposed to be, which is Atlantis attack.
True. Yeah, true. Yeah.
But yeah, so getting back now, cracking open this cover. Okay, we've got a little menu here. We've got a little Todd McFarlane Spidey in there just to appease the kids like me. But then you crack this open and we are subjected to early Rob Liefeld art. And even as a kid, I was like, what in the heck is this? I mean, Eric, Jesus Christ, I'm mixing them all up. The Image founders. Rob Liefeld has a notorious reputation as being a terrible artist, but this is like, this is like, he's probably like 18 or 19 years old. This art is horrendous. It's sub-professional art. Like, it doesn't even look to me like finished art. It just looks like, again, something maybe a talented high schooler would draw, which is exactly what he was at this point. But I mean, we could talk more about the art later, but we'll just talk about the story. We open up with I don't even remember who this is.
This is Gore.
Oh, this is Gore.
Yeah, this is the guy that's trying to bring back Set.
Gotcha. So he kind of like, he's like thinking about his master plan or whatever. He ends up killing one of his guards just to kind of like show how tough he is. Then we cut over to Spider-Man, who is referencing, like, again, this is chapter 4 of Atlantis Attack. So Spider-Man is referencing something that happened in Iron Man Annual number 10, which is that the Lemurian attack force tried to get through the Panama Canal. He's trying to sell pictures to the Daily Bugle, the same old story, which is fine. He goes back to the Daily Bugle, and Mary Jane happens to be at the Daily Bugle, kind of waiting for him. And then we are, again, subjected to a bunch of stock Rob Liefeld reactions. Like, when people... There's no such thing as, like, subtlety in Rob Liefeld art. It's either you're trying to be tough, you're trying to be sexy, or you're shocked. And we can see on this page, it's like, shocked. Everyone's shocked. Like falling down backwards, shocked. Looking at this thing on the news that the Abomination is back. Mm-hmm. Then we cut over to She-Hulk, dressed as a lawyer, coming out of J. Jonah Jameson's office, and I can't remember what she was there for.
She's there talking about his coverage of what the city is doing with the homeless population in New York, and at this point they're thinking that they're putting them in these trucks and shipping them off to New Jersey, but we learn later on, I don't even think it's necessarily in this one, but we learn later on that that's not the case.
Right. So then we cut over to Mary Jane and Peter Parker having lunch together. Mm-hmm. And as that's happening...
God.
I know. Well, there's so much to say.
Yeah.
Well, you talk about the art?
That and the fact that, like, his spider senses go off just as a big moving van with the Abomination in it is driving by.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Man.
Yeah, so this is Abomination and...
I can't remember her name. Lyra?
I can't remember. Yes, Lyra. And then they end up meeting up with Gar or Gwar. I always thought it was Gar. Is it Gwar or Gar?
It might be Gwar. I thought it was Gore.
Gar. Well, it's Ghaur. I don't know how to pronounce it, but anyway, so they get back and they've got a bunch of people like kind of locked up in these tubes, or like whatever you want to call them, chambers.
And it's the original Abomination. It's Emil Blonsky.
Oh, right.
Because this is like somebody else.
Yes.
This is the guy that's in charge of this like fake company that's being made.
Yeah. See, obviously you paid attention more than I did. Okay.
So this tube is to like transfer the Abomination monster back into Emil Blonsky.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, which they attempt to do, and they end up draining a bunch of electricity. We see like the power go in like New York, mm-hmm. And then meanwhile we cut to a parallel scene of She-Hulk and Peter Parker reacting to this. So they both spring into action, and we cut back, and Emil Blonsky is now reunited with the Abomination, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he breaks out. Again, this is kind of hard to follow because it's Rob Liefeld, but he breaks out of his thing that he's in, and then all of a sudden he's outside, and we see Spider-Man and She-Hulk running towards him, and they end up fighting, right?
Yeah, it really is just this big fight. when the abomination is put back into him, the abomination is kind of like taken over, just like the Hulk would, and Emil Blonsky is not there, so it's just kind of this big rampaging monster, and it's really just like a bunch of fighting that's happening. Nothing too exciting. At some point, Gore or whatever shows up to put the mark on She-Hulk, which is like the mark of Set's new wives or whatever. So she's going to be captured to be one of the women that are going to be forced to marry this god or whatever.
Right.
And honestly, it's really just fighting for the rest of the comic. She-Hulk ends up throwing like a gasoline truck or chemical truck or something at Abomination. He's on fire and he jumps off the bridge into another boat that then explodes, and that's kind of just the end of this. Like nothing really happens
there's
after
really
that.
nothing. Oh, then we have a little epilogue with Viper.
Right, and whatever, Tyrone, whatever.
And we know Viper from Wolverine, the second movie, right? Wolverine, the Wolverine.
Yeah.
You just summarized it in like a minute and a half. That's 27 pages.
Yeah.
That we just summarized. Well, all I can say is this is right here, ground zero for the Image Age, because Todd McFarlane's on Amazing, and now Rob Liefeld is guest drawing this annual. Eric Larson just drew a guest appearance. He had a guest appearance in Amazing. This is what Image was, it's just endless fighting and poses, and I mean, and all this has been said before, and I'm not saying that I hated this story, but it's pretty rough. I don't know what to say about it. I mean, what did you think of this story?
I think the storytelling through the art is pretty rough. The story itself is kind of whatever. You know what? It might be the most coherent story as just by itself. You can pretty much follow what's happening without having to know any of the prior knowledge. So I guess I'll kind of give it some points there, but it's pretty bland, I think. They don't really do a good job of making this a Spider-Man story. Like they try and put MJ in there, but it just kind of feels like she's being shoehorned into the story.
Right.
This Gore and Abomination stuff is just so boring. It's really bad. It's not fun.
Well, the thing about his art, okay, besides everything, all the criticisms I've already made, I mean, he definitely has promise. Again, I'm talking about him as a teenager, which he was at this time. And I can see where he's going. He's kind of imitating Art Adams and Todd McFarlane, fine. And when we talk about the storytelling, you can follow the story because he does know the basics of like how to make your eye follow through a page, because I've seen him talk about it in videos. But his weakness is that he has such a poor grasp of anatomy and perspective and backgrounds and things like that it's hard to tell like what room they're in or where people are relating to each other, right? Like he just...
Or even like the fighting, you know what I mean? Like them punching each other and like what exactly is going on in those like conflict scenes isn't great either, because it's just like a bunch of fighting in New York, like punching in New York. I mean,
and we'll also compare his art to the other people from this Atlantis attack story. Like I think Dave Ross did Spectacular, who's a much more traditional comic book artist, but he lacks flair. So maybe he's a little bit dull compared to this. But it's cool to put Abomination's face way up on the front and Spider-Man and She-Hulk way in the back, because it's more of a dynamic panel arrangement. But when you can't even tell, like, are those buildings behind them? Are they just lines? Like, he's really fudging the details. I think that's the problem. You know, he's got like a promising style, but he fudges everything else.
And you know what? I think that there's some moments that I'm like surprised at how like interesting the art is. Like it almost feels like it's stylized in his own way instead of being rushed. Like that first splash page of Gore looking down and he's like grasping the railing. Like that's pretty interesting, and I think it works too. His like whole style on this sort of like monstrous, grotesque face.
Right.
Totally works for me. I think later on when we see the Kingpin for like half a page, for some reason he just kind of shows up to be like, Kingpin's looking down on the fight. I think it's he looks ridiculous, but it kind of works. Like it's this like super exaggerated style, and he almost looks like he does in like the Spider-Verse animated movie, where it's just like his proportions are insane. He's essentially this just big round circle, and then there's the close-up of his face that's like lit from below, and it's creating all these shadows. So there's like moments where I'm like, oh, okay, this could kind of work, but then you see MJ's face and you're like, what is this? And then every time Spider-Man's swinging through the city, he's got literally 2 left feet. Like his feet are never in the right place. They're always facing the wrong way, or they're flipped. Like the there's one page. Sorry, I don't have the numbers, but it's after Abomination has escaped and Spidey and She-Hulk show up. There's this page where Spider-Man's already in this awful pose, but his feet are literally, his right foot is on his left leg and his left foot is on his right leg.
Okay, is this when Spider-Man's up in the air? Like
yeah, and his whole back is like arched and his head is like in the middle of his body. Yeah.
You're totally right. His
Awful.
feet are on the wrong legs. It's and again, you could find a million little things like that in this comic.
And like She-Hulk doesn't look awful in this frame. You know what I mean? Like it's, I don't know. There's moments where I'm like, okay, this could be good, and then the rest of it feels so rushed, or there's just like no care put into like what is, being drawn. Well,
my theory is that if Todd McFarlane was not already as popular as he was, I really don't think Rob Liefeld would have been hired, because I think he got by just being a vaguely resembling Todd McFarlane. That was it. But to me, any other time in Marvel history before this, he could not have gotten an assignment. I just don't see it, But anyway,
agreed.
Yeah. So
do we want to skip recommendations this episode? Because I feel like it's going to be kind of a resounding no.
Yeah.
Especially since we're not really getting the full story in these issues.
And for that reason, skip them, because you shouldn't have to buy 14 annuals to read a story. But that's just an opinion of mine, and I'm assuming yours. But okay. So,
it does feel weird that they're doing it in the annuals and not like its own book.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know.
It was an experiment that didn't last. I think it lasted 4 years, but I think after this year they split up the stories, so it'd be like 4 annuals of different individual stories.
Right.
Yeah. But we should also point out, because this is an annual, there's more stories to come. And I didn't really read these, but I did read them as a kid. But the first one is called My Science Project, and it's basically just a retelling of Amazing Fantasy 15, Spider-Man's origin.
It's exactly that, yeah.
It's Gerry, Conway, and Mark Bagley. And again, it's really just the same exact story with like added narration from Peter Parker. That's pretty much it. Yep.
And then after that, we get this like kind of montage clip thing where it's just about Spidey's spider senses. And then we get like a quick standalone Aunt May story, but really it's just Nick Katzenberg showing up at the house, answering like an ad in the paper about a room for rent at Aunt May's boarding house, and he's taking pictures, and then once she finds out who he is, she kicks him out, and that's the end of the story. So it's fine. That might be the best thing in this book, honestly. It's fine. And then we get
this is the stuff I like. Like Fred Hembeck, who's a funny cartoon artist, like listing Spider-Man's top 30 villain countdown. Because this was informative. When I was a kid, this was informative to me, So I thought it was cool. Yeah. So they basically count down his top 30 villains. And I don't know, you see them drawn by Fred Hembeck, but you get an idea of what they all look like. And I think it was pretty cool. I like this part. What about you?
Yeah, I'm just surprised Silvermane made the cut.
Yeah, good
I was
point.
like, whoa, I'm
Yep.
surprised to see this guy. Yeah, this stuff is really fun. I think that's in all three of these issues.
Yeah, I think
and
so.
it's always kind of fun. There's also like a little mini comic, I think, as well. It's about like what happens with JJ and the Scorpion, I think, right?
Yeah, well, we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
But I just want to ask you, were there any other surprises besides, you said you were surprised by Silvermane. Was anyone else on this list a surprise to you?
I don't think so. Everybody else seemed, or maybe the Molten Man, I guess.
Where is Molten Man?
He's right next to Silvermane.
Oh, geez. Yeah, you know what?
Because I don't
Yeah.
remember him like talking about him ever.
No.
So that means it's been like a decade.
He was probably big in the late 70s.
At least,
That's what
yeah.
it was. Or like around that area. Just like the Human Fly, why is he there? Or wait, is it
Human Fly, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's shown up a couple of times though, and especially with like this artist is a big fan of the Human Fly,
Right,
I
'cause
think,
he drew
right?
that
So
issue, right.
I was pretty happy actually to see him.
It's nice to see Venom in there, so high up. And he's only made 3 appearances at this point.
Yeah.
But anyway. And then, of course, number 1 is Hobgoblin / Green Goblin. That's cool.
Yeah.
Then we jump to Fred Hembeck's Spidey versus JJJ, which is kind of a explanation of the whole history of J. Jonah Jameson and Spider-Man, which I thought was, again, really informative. When I was a kid, I thought it was a cool little feature to have in there. And then we end on a down note, the Saga of the Serpent Crown. Peter Sanderson writing and Mark Bagley penciling. So again, it makes me wonder why they didn't just call this crossover event like the Serpent Crown or something, right?
Yeah.
Like, why was it Atlantis attacks? Well, maybe because Atlantis is more well known. I don't know, but
Maybe, yeah.
yeah. These backups, even as a kid, I just, no offense, but I to these creators, I couldn't read them. I could not read them.
It's essentially a history book.
Right.
Like it's very dense and not interesting.
Yep.
We're not like there's a couple of pages of dialogue, but then the rest of it is just like text explaining things happening, and it's real boring. Also, has Icarus always looked literally exactly like He-Man?
Yeah, I think so. Wait a minute.
He's even got like the bob haircut and like the big armor plates he's got on his body. I had to do a double take. I was like, wait, what? Is this He-Man? And then it looks exactly like him.
That's a good point. I never thought about that, but I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. But
wow. Okay.
I don't know. It's whatever.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, overall, I think these little backups by Fred Hembeck are the best part of the annual. I think. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too.
And you could reprint those anytime, and they'd pretty much be relevant, which is cool.
Yeah.
But, okay, so now we are going to jump to Spectacular Spider-Man Annual number 9.
Sure.
Continuing Atlantis attacks, and now we're jumping to chapter 6. So it went 4, then now it's 6 because there was Punisher in between.
Mm-hmm. This is kind of like the thing that I was talking about earlier. We kind of find out about the plan to turn the people of New York into snake men. Right. So that's pretty much the gist of things going on here.
Yeah, I'll do my best to summarize this. But,
okay.
So again, this Dave Ross, I've actually met him. He came to Windsor in 1989 or 1990, around this time. So that was cool. This art is much more professional, but like we said earlier, it's a little bit dull as far as layouts. But I don't mind that. I think it's fine. The art actually, it's kind of cool. It's got some cool moments. But basically, Spider-Man is outside of a nightclub, hanging out, and oh no, it's not a nightclub.
No,
it is a nightclub.
This is the
this is the bunch of people going into the
this is the organization that the Abomination, who is now back to being a human, I can't remember the guy's name, Dr. Tyrone.
Right.
So him and Gore or whatever his name is. have created a fake society with like a cure for addiction.
Right.
So all of these people are lined up outside trying to kind of like break their drug addictions.
Right. It helps to read them, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, so and again, this is what I love about these characters is then Spider-Man runs into Cloak and Dagger, and they're always kind of at odds with each other, even though they're both quote good guys, which is cool. So first he runs into Cloak, and he's chatting with Cloak, trying to figure out what's going on, but then Cloak just disappears because that's part of his power, right? He can just kind of teleport. And then he runs into Dagger. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but has Dagger always been blind, or is this a new development?
No, I think this is a new development.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, did I miss that the first 20 times I read about it? But anyway.
Unless they retconned it in between, it was never established before when we first are introduced to them that she's blind.
Okay. So they get into their typical argument, and then they disappear. Oh no, he makes.
Well, he captures Spidey in his cape and then teleports away, which leaves Dagger defenseless, and that's when Gore kind of swoops in and sees another pretty lady and is like, "I'm gonna take her to be one of the 7 serpent wives." Right.
Meanwhile, Spider-Man is in like Cloak's kind of like nightmare realm in his cape.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you know what? The more I look at this art actually is pretty good. I don't mind it. Yeah. Nothing wrong with it. That's for sure. So Spider-Man ends up in, is this Central Park?
Yeah.
Hanging out with some homeless people, which was touched on in the Amazing Spider-Man annual. Mm-hmm. And then he takes off, and then we cut back to Cloak reuniting with Dagger. And then they flash back to their origin, right? So for young readers like me at the time, we find out how they got their powers and everything. And then we cut over to Tyrannus, who is, well, he's calling himself Tyrone, but it's actually Tyrannus, right?
Right.
And like you said, he has now decided he's going to use Dagger as one of his brides or whatever he calls them, right?
Yep.
So then we cut over.
Puts the mark on her and then takes her away in his spaceship, I guess.
Yeah, of course. Everyone's got one. So then we cut over to Peter Parker developing his pictures, and wait, hold on a sec. What happens here? I don't even remember this. He sees a picture of this guy named Brother Elton, and he enlarges the picture of his wrist, and he sees a symbol on his wrist, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's the same snake symbol that has been put onto the wives, and now it's being put onto these people that are going to cure their addictions.
Right. And by the way, look at that shot of Spidey at the bottom there. Again, that's what happens when you learn to draw by looking at real people and not other comic books. Like, that looks like a Dave Ross Spider-Man. Like, it looks like a real person as depicted by Dave Ross, and that's why it looks good. And like, even the next page, like these shots of Spider-Man, like again, this is not copied from another artist. This is a real human like perspective looking up as Spider-Man's swinging over. Like, it's really cool. So
and then even like the next page when he's diving off of the roof backwards, it's fantastic.
Actually, that's a good point. Yeah, this is even better than I thought. You're right. So yeah, he's talking with Cloak, and he's trying to convince him to help him. Is that what's happening? I don't even remember.
Yeah, and because Dagger's missing, he kind of agrees, and he gives him the note that was left behind by Dagger, but obviously it was Tyrannus or whatever. So he's like, all right, cool, I'm going to go investigate this tattoo thing.
Right. So then Cloak ends up going in and into Tyrone's little headquarters there, and he ends up getting kind of like hypnotized by Tyrone, right? Tyrannus?
Well, he convinces him that if he goes and steals this book from this temple or whatever, that he'll let Dagger go.
Right.
So Cloak just kind of agrees to it, and like in an instant he like disappears and then reappears, and he has this book for him.
Right.
And it's like ancient texts of the sons of the serpent cult.
Right.
So it's obviously going to be needed for something. And then right after that, Tyrannus obviously double crosses him and sends his snake people after him. And Cloak is like in this gigantic warehouse essentially. And it's just like hundreds of these snake people with swords start attacking him. And then we see Spidey. He's following, I think, one of the patients, if I'm not mistaken, and that are being carted away into the ambulance. And he sneaks into one of them, and he goes to pull down the sheet that's covering them, and he sees this like deformed human that is slowly turning into a snake person. Just as Cloak is able to save Dagger, and the two of them vanish away.
Right.
So I'm trying to remember. Then Tyrannus shoots beams out of his eyes to hypnotize Spider-Man, I guess, and we're left on a little bit of a cliffhanger of what's to happen to him. I guess maybe that's what the book is for. I don't really know.
And also, we read the Daredevil Annual already, remember? We reviewed it. And how do you remember what happens in that one? You remember that one?
Did we really?
Oh, yeah, we reviewed it.
No, I don't remember. Oh!
Yeah.
I kind of do, yeah.
It wasn't very memorable, but yeah. Okay, let's just talk about this story quickly. I thought it was much more coherent than the last one. At least it was more of a story. It was definitely helped by Dave Ross's art. What did you think? Yeah,
the art is unbelievably good in this one. It's so fun. The anatomy is great. It's super easy to follow through the storytelling. There's also like some great moments in the story, in like the layouts and how everything is being told. When Spidey is in Cloak's cloak, and he's like falling in nothingness constantly, and then as he's being pushed out, we kind of see the panels slowly going down, getting smaller and smaller as he's kind of like pushed back into reality, while this like monster swallows him whole. And when he finally is like swallowed, he's actually just like on the ground in Central Park. It's really great. Very abstract and fun. I love earlier on, there's a few moments when Spidey first like jumps over to see Dagger. His eyes and his mask are like really tiny, and they're like the huge blue eyes. It's really great.
That they're blue. Yes.
Yeah. It kind of like it just shows that she's like really bright and shining so brightly in his face. So like he's squinting in the mask, and because of that, the highlights in the blacks of his suit are usually blue. So like his mask is turned blue. It's really great. There's just always these really fun moments. All of the characters look good too. Even the background characters, like when he is in Central Park and he's talking to these homeless people, they look like real people. Like they feel like they all have stories. Like they're not just blank faces that we're gonna forget in the next page. They kind of, they look real.
Right.
Yeah, there's some really, really good stuff.
I agree. Yeah. And I think he does some fill-ins on Web of Spider-Man coming up, so I think we'll see more of him soon. That'd be cool. So, anyway, this issue also has some backups, which I did not read. I don't know if you read this one, The Prowler and Freefall.
Oh, yeah, I did. It's pretty quick. Essentially, this guy falls off of one of the girders at this like construction site, and we have Hobie Brown, right? Hobie Brown?
Yeah.
Who is the Prowler. He's also on the construction site working, and he's kind of like a little upset about what happened. So when he goes back home, he decides to like spend the rest of his night creating this invention that is like a backpack that will immediately deploy and will like slowly bring people to the ground, and they can kind of like glide their way and steer. And it's supposed to be like better than a parachute because it can offer immediate like support instead of having to like open up. Anyways, so he draws up the plans for this, and his girlfriend or wife comes home late at night and tries to convince him to sell this invention. And he's like, no, I've got to, do some tweaks. It's not ready yet, yada yada. And she is like, listen, and he falls asleep or whatever. So while he's asleep, she takes the plan and kind of says like, he's never gonna get anywhere if he doesn't believe in himself. So I'm gonna believe in him and try and get somebody to buy these plans. So later the next day, she shows up to his work to kind of tell him this, and then he's very upset because he finds out that she sold it to Justin Hammer of Hammer Industries. So he's like, well, shit, now I've got to go take those plans back. So he dresses up as the Prowler and he goes to one of the facilities, and there's this guy there that is like a new kind of supervillain dude who is wearing the backpack with this cape, and essentially Prowler and him kind of fight, and Prowler is easily able to take control of him, and it turns out that it's just like this worker who was promised a promotion if he was able to use this suit to steal something. And the Prowler's like, tell your boss that you quit, yada yada yada. He takes the plans and he goes back to work, and then we get this like little bit of a stinger where the autopsy it returns, and it turns out that the worker at the beginning was dead before the fall, and it looked like something smashed in his skull. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely something else going on to this than was originally thought, and that's where we're left at the end of that little story. And I believe it was good.
Yeah, it was. Well, I was good when I read it 30 years ago, but
right.
I think it's picked up actually the next year's annual, which is kind of a funny way to do it. But
wow.
I know there's another, what's it called? Story to come from cool. What's his name?
Hobie Brown.
Yeah. So anyway, after that we have Spider-Man reveals the 25 most important women in his life. Right. And I mean, it's a lot of the people you'd expect, but some of the surprises I'll mention are Candy, Randy, and Bambi are tied at number 25. I think it's funny. April May, I had never heard of. She must be from...
Yeah, I'm not sure who she is.
Maybe the 70s. I never read any stories with her, so that's a period I don't know much about. It was nice to see our favorite character.
Yep, at number 9.
Yeah, number 9. Where is she? Deborah Whitman.
Whitman.
I'm just going to read her little entry there.
Surprised she's so high up. I know, eh? I was excited to see her.
Back in the ESU days, I dated this fellow grad student rather heavily, having all the insecurities and self-doubts of a younger Peter Parker, not to mention the glasses. Her love for me turned to obsession, and she was soon given to delusions I was Spider-Man. Shocking her back to reality with a confession, we parted friends as she returned to the Midwest, determined to put her life back together. Sad what happened with her, but anyway. I
know.
Yep. Just some other surprises in here. Gwen Stacy's clone is on here.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I love that Jean DeWolf is in here, and I also like that they gave her like story a better conclusion in this little write up than not the gang war, was it? What was it?
Sin Eater Saga.
Sin Eater Saga.
Yeah. Less said about that, the better.
Who else?
I
was surprised to see Marla Jameson.
Yeah, where's she again? Oh, she's
she was the one who made one of the Spider Slayers.
Marla Madison Jameson. She married J. Jonah Jameson, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, I don't really know much about her. I think she's only been in like 1 or 2 issues that we've ever covered, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of weird. Also, there's an entry for Betty Brant, and she looks like she's drawn by a different artist. Like I want to say almost like like Daniel Klaus or something. totally different.
Throughout, like Liz Allen looks like a different artist as well.
Yeah.
Even Aunt May a little bit to some extent looks an MJ.
Yes. Well, here's the thing: is I didn't know this until recently, but Fred Hembeck can draw traditional comic book art. Like he did. He did a Marvel Comics Presents story where he did. It wasn't like genius level art, but it was fine. Like he can actually draw well, like realistically. So yeah, he was probably just changing up his style for these certain shots, you know, which is pretty cool.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah. Anyway, so Gwen Stacy's number 4, Mary Parker, who's his mother, is number 3, Aunt May's 2, and of course Mary Jane's number 1. So,
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So then we jump to a story by Gerry Conway and Dan Jurgens called Sweet Revenge. And it's a solo story for Mary Jane, and it starts off with her breaking into the prison that what's his name, Caesar, is in.
Caesar. Oh my god, I almost called him Caesar Romero. Not the Joker.
Yeah, Jonathan Caesar. So she breaks into this prison and shoots him dead. But then, we realize she was just daydreaming, and she's actually waiting to go into, like, not a job interview, but I guess
like a modeling agency type thing. Yeah,
like to find out if she can get this job. And it turns out that the guy turns her down, and then after she walks out, we see that he calls Jonathan Caesar and is like, "Tell him," or someone who knows him, "Tell Mr. Caesar he owes me one." So obviously this is still Jonathan Caesar working behind the scenes to sabotage her career. Mary Jane comes home and she's given a surprise birthday party by Peter and everybody else. And then she decides to take this opportunity to get a picture taken of herself kissing Peter Parker and sending it to Jonathan Caesar in jail just to torture him. You know, just to make, because, you know, after all the shit that he's done to her life, I think he deserves it. But anyway, then, I mean, it was not a bad story. It wasn't bad. I don't know if you read that one.
Yeah, it was okay. This one, on the other hand, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't read this last one.
Oh no, these last ones again.
At this point, I had given up on this Serpent Society.
Yeah, like, can I just say,
nonsense.
These comics were made, I'm assuming, for my age group at the time, 12, 13. I read them when I was 12 or 13, and even then, I knew these backup stories were not good. They were just. There's a way to do this that's not so boring, but like you said, it's like reading an encyclopedia, which can be actually entertaining, but this is just done in a way that's not entertaining. Yeah. I don't know. It's just not good.
Yeah, it's just kind of more of the history of the Serpent Crown.
Right.
And how it's kind of bounced from people to people, and there's different rulers, and a lot of the times it's like Atlanteans or... what's the other fish people? I think they're called the Sirens now. What are they? What was that?
Lemurians?
Murians, yeah.
No, Lemurians.
Lemurians, sure.
I think, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the problem is, like, even if this story was literally a university professor telling someone, at least it could be done in a way like, it's almost like, remember in Indiana Jones, the first one, when they're explaining what the arc is to those two guys, at least it's done in an interesting way. Like, this happened, then that happened, then the Hebrews did this. But this is just taking old stories and kind of remaking them. But if you look at each page, there's so much text to read and so many speech bubbles, and it's not done in an interesting way. It's just an information dump, right?
Yep.
So, yeah. Not very good.
No, not great. Yeah, so that's the amazing annual, or sorry, the spectacular annual. Yes. Now and I guess we'll move to web. Sure. Okay, this one is number 5.
Yeah.
Oh wait. No, this is 11. Sorry, I was reading the
it's number
Fantastic
5.
Four,
Annual 5,
or is it
chapter
5?
11? Yes.
Yeah. So at this point in this story arc, Atlantis has been convinced to attack Earth. So, the entire U.S. Navy is, and military, and like everybody is here, at Manhattan Island. They're getting ready for the attack. We've got Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four, who are also accompanied by Ben Grimm, because at this time Ben Grimm is not part of the Fantastic. Oh, sorry, I have that backwards. Accompanied by the She-Thing.
Yes, she wasn't called She-Thing, but it was Sharon Ventura, who is the second Ms. Marvel who was mutated into a female thing.
Right. Yeah. And who is, I think at the time, possibly dating Ben Grimm. I can't remember if they're together or not.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so they're all there. Atlanteans show up, and it's really just kind of like a bunch of fighting. Throughout this story, we are introduced to some reporters who are kind of like going back and forth. So everything that's happening in this issue really is just a bunch of fighting, and it's kind of narrated through these reporters who are doing voiceover, and it's almost like this issue is like on the news, so we're kind of like watching it as it's happening. So we do cut over and we see Aunt May and MJ. They're on their couch at their place and obviously watching the news and what's happening, and they're completely terrified. Spidey's webbing people up. Mrs. Fantastic or Sue is like using her force fields to bump people back into the ocean. She-Thing is throwing tanks. Mr. Fantastic is wrapping around things. They're all doing whatever they're doing. And then there is this, it kind of seems like they might be winning. And then all of a sudden, Peter's Spidey senses go off, and we see this giant, like, toad sea monster pop out of the ocean. And on its back is like this little electronic device that is being piloted by some Atlantean guy. And we cut over to, oh man, what is happening here? The Gore and what's this dude's name?
Boy, I don't know.
Oh man. Anyways, Lyra and Gore are here, and they're talking to one of their like commanders. Actually, I think this guy is leading Atlantis at the time.
Okay.
So he's kind of like in charge of what's going on and convincing Atlantis to continue to attack New York. And then it's just a big fight. This big monster is able to throw the thing, no problem. So Spidey's concerned because if it's able to overtake the strongest person in this fight, then he's kind of in danger. So we see Mr. Fantastic is easily slapped away and he's turned into spaghetti. Sue's concerned. It's able to clap its hands together and extinguish the Human Torch's flame, and he falls to the ground. Spidey's not sure what he's going to do, so instead of like fighting this thing head on, he's got to figure out some sort of way to outsmart it and the person controlling it. So he leads it over to like Times Square, I'm assuming, somewhere, and convinces it to like punch one of the giant LCD screens that's hanging up there, and it electrocutes this monster, which is able to also fry the control system of this guy that's controlling the monster. So now this thing is kind of just on a rampage. So they're able to like lead it to the ocean, and it goes back to Atlantis as Peter webs up the Atlantean and holds him there for the police, I guess. We cut back over to this leader of the Atlanteans as he gets a little FaceTime call from one of his buddies back home, and it turns out that Atlantis is being attacked. So all of the Atlanteans retreat, and it looks like Spidey and the Fantastic Four might go and help them. And yeah, that's kind of it. We get a little bit of a wrap up with the the news reporters as they're kind of reporting on this thing ending, and they do end up arresting this leader guy, and they're gonna sue him, I guess. And that's about it.
So
it's really just a big fight, this one.
I've owned this comic since 1989, and I don't think I've ever gone back and reread it. So my question is, why did I keep it? Like, why didn't I just sell it?
Yeah, maybe it's because did you have the rest of them or just this?
Yeah, but they were all crap. You know
true,
what I mean? Like,
true, yeah.
So,
like this one really did feel like oh shit, we called this Atlantis Attacks. Maybe Atlantis should attack at some point.
Right.
So they're like, okay, let's give them an entire issue of Atlantis attacking, and we will, we'll be good. Our mission will be complete, I guess. Yeah, it's real boring. Honestly, not much happens really. Like,
and the thing is as much as we criticized Rob Liefeld's art, in a way this is kind of worse. Now, Javier, I don't know how to pronounce his name exactly, but I think it's Javier Saltares. Just a minute here.
Javier.
Oh, there you go. Javier Saltares. I'm sorry.
Saltares. Javier Saltares, I believe. I believe.
Saltares. Yeah. He went on to pencil Ghost Rider, and that was a huge hit. But I got to give the credit to the inker, Mark Texiera, because he's a decent penciler, but here his pencils are really weak, I think.
Yeah, I think it's fine at points. I think it gets really, really messy when it's like... You good? Sorry, my dog's coughing out something. It gets really weak when it turns into like the big crowd shots and there's a lot going on. When it's able to just be like a panel of two people talking or a close-up or just like a fishman shooting somebody, it's pretty good and solid. But it's when it's got to be more that it just kind of turns into like a bit of a mess.
Well, there's also a lot of really grotesque anatomy, like weird exaggerations that don't seem to serve a purpose. Like a lot of times you'll see Spider-Man swinging around and the anatomy is just exaggerated in a weird way. Like I'm not sure what he's going for, but I guess it's just generally kind of ugly, you know? It's like he's not making his art look appealing. That's part of the problem, I think.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
Yeah, ew. So yeah, again, I did not reread this for this episode, but I have read it before. But it was rough. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really not even like an issue. There's no story happening. Mm-hmm. It's kind of just a way to have Atlantis attack and then retreat back to Atlantis once the big bad guys turn on them. So
exactly.
Yeah, it's more of a set piece, I guess, in this big story rather than a story in and of itself. Right. We got some backup stories to Captain Universe fights a robot.
Drawn by Spider-Man co-creator Steve Ditko. We should point that out. Did you notice that? Yeah,
the art's fun.
I mean, late period Steve Ditko is not nearly as good as classic Steve Ditko, but it's still fine.
Yeah, it's extremely simple. It does feel very retro, both the story and the art.
Right.
But yeah, it's fine. I don't know. He does like a funny little finger wag at the robot that I liked. But
what was that?
When he first shows up, he like does like a close up. He like goes right up to the tin soldier's face and goes, Yeah. I'm afraid I really can't allow that. Mm-hmm. And then he gets slapped. It's I don't know. Nothing really happens in this one either. He gets smacked away by this big tin can robot, and then nothing else really happens. He like kind of blows it up or whatever, and then he goes back to work.
I think Ditko also co-created Captain Universe, and that's probably why he did this story. But yeah, kind of an odd place to just stick this in a Spider-Man annual, but whatever. Yeah,
and then we get to like maybe one of the best things. I think the best thing in this book for sure. We get this cute little story. It's Petey, The Adventures of Petey, or Petey, The Adventures of Peter Parker before he became Spider-Man.
Right.
So it's him as like a little kid. He is given an envelope by his Aunt May with some money in it. And he's told to go down to the pharmacy to pick up some medicine for Uncle Ben because he's not feeling too well. And on his way, he runs into Liz Allen and Flash Thompson. And Flash at this point is kind of still bullying him. So Flash convinces him, when he finds out he's got the money, convinces him to go get some cream sodas instead of going to the pharmacy. So the three of them are sitting down at the bar. They drink their like sundaes, and the pharmacist walks in and says, "Hey, Peter, your Aunt May told me you would be here. Where's the envelope?" So he hands over the envelope, and he's given back the change, and it's just 75 cents. Oh, sorry, like 25 cents. And now they can't pay for the sundaes that they just finished. So the three of them fall to the ground as the attendant at this bar runs around and is trying to check up on them, and Flash whispers to them and says, "Shh, this is work before. Just keep your mouth shut." And they've like pretended to faint, and so they don't have to pay. It's a cute little story.
Yeah, like it's honestly it's something where it'd be cool to see this turn into like a regular feature.
Yeah,
it's not bad.
It's like it feels very comic strippy.
Mm-hmm.
The story and the style of the art's great. And then after that we get Spider-Man's most dubious accessories. So we get like,
yes, I love this.
It's pretty fun. So we kind of get like a little bit of a it's not even necessarily like accessories. We do see the spider buggy, but then we kind of see like different versions of Spider-Man.
Right. Yeah.
So we see the bombastic Spider-Man, or I can't remember. It's the bombastic something. Bombastic Bagman.
Oh, when he has
I think it's
Four costume with the paper bag over his head.
Yeah, I think it's after he gives the symbiote suit to the Fantastic Four. Right. He has to leave with a brown bag over his head in a Fantastic Four costume. It's great. We see Spider-Ham. We see Spider-Man when he grows the two extra pairs of arms.
Right.
It's fun.
We see the Spider-Mobile. I've never read that story, but I can't wait to get to that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then we kind of end things with we have a couple more things. We got the dubious friends and foes.
Most dubious friends and foes, including what's this
Frogman?
guy? Razorback, Top Dog, Howard the Duck. And then let's list them all. Dracula, Frankenstein, Werewolf, Brother Voodoo, what's his name? The Spider Kid, Frogman,
Hypno Hustler.
White Rabbit, Hypno Hustler. I've never read that story. Can't wait.
Yeah, I don't think I've read that one.
We've also got, what's his name?
Humbug.
Humbug, right? Yeah. So cool. Yeah, this is what separates Spider-Man from the more serious superheroes. Like, there's always been like a little bit of satire in Spider-Man, and that's
I like
why
it.
I love this character.
And then we get like a little page of like some of the situations I guess he's been in. So we see like Doc Ock and Aunt May
getting married.
And
we see him trapped in the suburbs.
Secret Wars with the Beyonder.
Yes,
like all that
teaching him how
stuff.
to go to the bathroom. That was awesome.
Yeah.
And then we have a solo story with Silver Sable. I don't know if you read this one.
I did not.
No, I did not either. So we can't really comment on it, can we? I mean, again, I give them props for trying to give her own solo story, but this art is it's not terrible, but again, it just looks like filler art, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it just didn't make me want to read it, so I didn't read it. And then we end once again with the Saga of the Serpent Crown, Chapter 11, and more art and story that I just don't want to look at and don't want to read, so I didn't.
Yep.
So overall, these crossover annuals, I mean, potentially it could work. It's not a terrible idea because at least you have a crossover with every book, but you're not interfering with the main book. So the idea of an annual doing the crossover is kind of cool. It's just that this was also coincidentally at the time they decided to make everything really terrible. Right?
Yeah.
So the art's terrible, the writing's usually terrible. It's just, I don't know. I mean, that's why there's a lot of Facebook groups that are dedicated to Marvel and DC, and they usually cut off around 86 because there's this idea. I mean, that's considered the end of the Bronze Age, but a lot of people think there was a decline in quality around this time with Marvel, which coincidentally is just as I was becoming a big reader. So it was kind of a bad time for me to be getting in. But I mean, at the time, I liked it, but I think I sensed it wasn't great. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this whole arc is a little stinky.
Yeah.
Not great.
Yeah, like what do you say about it? Failure. I think it's a big failure.
Yeah. Spectacular has some great art in it this week, so maybe thumb through it if you've got the issues in front of you, but judging just from these 3 issues, I don't think I would be recommending the Atlantis Attacks story arc.
No.
And from what I know of it, and it being notoriously panned, yeah, I read the new one. Read the 2020 updated one. It's pretty fun.
Okay, is it really?
I liked it. Yeah, it's got some fun stuff with Namor, and there's like this new like world that has been created called Pan, and it's like a world that has like a bunch of doors in it that lead to other places in Asia, and it's supposed to be like this place outside of time where like refugees could go to, and it's pretty fun. And there's like some dragons and things like that in it. It's good. I like it.
Okay. Well, yeah, definitely check that out then, but do not check these out. Like, again, I kept these since I was a kid, but other than the Fred Hembeck little backup things, there's almost no reason to reread these ever. Like they're every story in them is disposable, I think.
I wonder if there's a collection of his work. Of like
I know,
Marvel,
there are collections, but I don't know if this stuff was included. But yeah, it's definitely worth including, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Ooh, so as you noticed, Bex Luthor and G.I. Jolie were not with us this week. I'm sure that the picks this week had nothing to do with that choice, but maybe they did.
I'm starting to think maybe.
This is a low point. I mean, Spider-Man is on a slow decline at this point in the late 80s, but this is a low point. But we still have a few more episodes to go before we wrap up the 80s, and be sure to join us next week when we review 3 episodes of the cartoon again.
Ooh.
Featuring an appearance by Miles Warren and the first 2 parts of the Secret Wars storyline.
That's
that
going to
should
be pretty
really
interesting. Yep.
There you go. You can take it from here.
All right. Let us know what you guys think about the podcast and the issues or shows or movies that we're talking about. You can find us anywhere you can find podcasts. You can also find us on our website at thecomicbooksyndicate.com. Please leave us a review or a comment. Let us know what you guys think about the issues we're talking about. We want to keep that comics conversation going, so keep in touch.
That's right. So until next Monday, Spider Friend, go for it!